Born into American royalty and shadowed by two towering parents, President Franklin D. Roosevelt and First Lady Eleanor, James Roosevelt was expected to shine. But what happens when the weight of a legacy becomes both a gift and a curse? From privileged childhood in a snow-draped Manhattan townhouse to the gritty battlefields of the Pacific, James's life was anything but linear. He was a Harvard Golden Boy, a White House insider, a scandal-scarred politician, and a war hero who bled for something more than reputation. Behind every public triumph was a private cost: ulcers, heartbreak, broken marriages, and relentless pressure to live up to a surname that symbolized American strength. This isn't just a story about the son of a president. It's a portrait of a man who kept getting back up, even when history tried to write him off. Dive into the untold life of James Roosevelt, a story of power, pain, and the quiet courage it takes to find one's own name inside a legend's shadow. It's December 23rd, 1907, and New York City is draped in snow, the flakes dancing like stardust outside a stately townhouse on East 36th Street. Beneath the gleam of Tiffany chandeliers, James Roosevelt's cries pierce the winter air, heralding the arrival of Franklin and Eleanor's second child. The Roosevelt family, rooted in America's revolutionary past, is already a dynasty, and this newborn is swaddled in a christening gown older than his parents' romance, a relic steeped in expectation. Franklin, pacing with a blend of pride and restless energy, sees in his son the spark of Roosevelt ambition, a drive to conquer, tempered by duty to serve. Eleanor, her gaze both tender and wary, studies the boy's features, sensing the challenges that await. Before James can speak, the press anoints him the president's boy, a label that will cling to him for 8 decades, at times a badge of honor, at times a suffocating yoke. James's early years are a tapestry of privilege and pain. One moment he's racing across White House lawns, his laughter echoing as staff polish his skates for winter games. The next, he's frozen in a nursery, watching Eleanor sob beside the tiny coffin of his brother, Franklin Jr., taken by influenza in 1909 at just 7 months. At 3, James grasps a harsh truth. Even the mightiest families are not spared grief. Eleanor, haunted by loss, holds him close, instilling resilience before he learns to count. Franklin, to escape the void, dives into New York's political arena with a ferocity that suggests motion can heal wounds. James internalizes this: keep moving or sorrow will catch you. At Groton School, the elite forge for America's future leaders, James dazzles. He's quick-witted, tossing clever remarks in Latin, shattering athletic records, and charming peers with a grin that masks his inner turmoil. But ulcers gnaw at his stomach, flaring whenever expectations are mentioned. Letters from home, infused with the scent of cigars and Hudson River damp, chart Franklin's ascent from state senator to assistant secretary of the Navy. Then, in 1921, catastrophe strikes. Polio steals Franklin's mobility. At 13, James is summoned to Campobello Island, tasked with shielding his father's condition from reporters. He stands sentinel outside Franklin's door, deflecting curiosity with a smile honed in dorm mirrors. He adores his father, but a quiet resentment simmers. Why must he, the eldest, bear this secret, heavier than his school trunks? Years later, he recalls a night when Franklin, racked with pain, clasped his hand and said, "We get up, Jimmy, or we're not Roosevelts." Those words become his mantra, etched deeper than any wound. The 1920s roar to life at Harvard University, where the air hums with the syncopated rhythms of jazz drifting from open dorm windows, the rumble of Model T Fords clogging Cambridge streets, and the clink of glasses in secret speakeasies, where students debate socialism over bootleg gin. James Roosevelt, the eldest surviving son of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, steps into this vibrant world as a young man caught between privilege and pressure. Enrolled to study history, he quickly proves himself more than a scholar. With a quick wit and an infectious grin, James captivates classmates, spinning tales of his father, a man who, despite being struck by polio in 1921, refuses wheelchairs and can tie a sailor's knot with the ease of a seasoned mariner. These stories, told over late-night card games or during strolls across Harvard Yard, cement his reputation as a storyteller, a charmer, a natural leader. Yet beneath the polished exterior, a quiet insecurity festers. Are his accolades, his top grades, his invitations to exclusive clubs, earned through talent or merely bestowed because of the Roosevelt name? The weight of that name is a constant companion. James, now in his early 20s, feels its presence in every professor's nod, every classmate's glance. His father's meteoric rise from New York State Senator to Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and by 1920, a vice presidential candidate, casts a long shadow. Franklin's polio diagnosis, which left him paralyzed from the waist down, only amplifies the family's mystique, turning him into a symbol of resilience. James, who at 13 stood guard at Campobello Island to shield his father's condition from prying reporters, knows the cost of that myth. The memory of those days, coupled with the expectations of his lineage, fuels a gnawing pain in his stomach. Ulcers, diagnosed in his teens, flare with every mention of legacy or duty. Yet James pushes through, dazzling at debates, leading crew teams, and dancing at galas with a smile that hides the burn. To falter, he believes, is to fail the Roosevelt creed, command the room or lose it. Harvard's social whirl offers both escape and challenge. James thrives in the camaraderie of late-night discussions, where he argues about jazz versus classical music or the merits of prohibition with equal fervor. He joins the Hasty Pudding Club, delighting audiences with sharp comedic performances, and earns a spot in the Porcellian, Harvard's most elite social club, where his charm bridges divides between old money heirs and ambitious newcomers. But the ulcers worsen, a physical echo of his fear that his successes are unearned. He confides in a close friend one night, over a smuggled bottle of whiskey, that he sometimes wonders if he's just a name on a pedestal. The friend laughs it off, but James's doubt lingers, a quiet ache that no amount of applause can soothe. As the decade nears its end, the Great Depression crashes into America, plunging millions into poverty. The stock market's collapse in 1929 sends shockwaves through Harvard, where once carefree students now whisper about family fortunes lost. James, insulated by the Roosevelt wealth, feels the nation's pain through his parents' letters. Eleanor, ever the activist, writes of breadlines and despair. Franklin, plotting a political comeback, urges James to see the world beyond Cambridge. In June 1930, James graduated, his diploma a testament to his intellect, his handshake honed to a diplomat's precision. The ceremony, held under a gray New England sky, feels like a crossroads. At 22, he's no longer just a student. He's a Roosevelt, expected to shape the world. Weeks later, on a radiant summer day, James stands at the altar of St. Thomas Church in New York City, marrying Betsy Cushing, a debutante whose beauty graces Vogue covers and whose poise navigates the treacherous waters of high society. Betsy, daughter of a prominent surgeon, is no mere socialite. Her sharp wit matches James's, and her quiet strength grounds him. Their wedding is a spectacle of hope in a despairing nation, Cascading roses adorn the pews, a 7-tier cake towers in the reception hall, and flashbulbs pop as crowds outside cheer, as if this union could mend a fractured country. The guest list reads like a who's who of America: politicians, tycoons, and Roosevelts, with Franklin beaming despite his leg braces, and Eleanor offering a reserved but warm embrace. Betsy, in a gown of ivory silk, is James's equal in charisma, but she knows the Roosevelt world. Its scrutiny, its demands, will test her resilience. Their early months are a whirlwind of love, filled with yacht trips along the Hudson and quiet evenings dreaming of a family. Yet the pressure of James's lineage, coupled with his restless ambition, begins to strain their bond, planting seeds of tension that will grow in the years ahead. In 1932, with the nation still reeling from economic collapse, James dived headfirst into his father's presidential campaign, a daring bid to lead America out of despair. Franklin D. Roosevelt, now governor of New York, is a polarizing figure, a beacon of hope to some, a privileged aristocrat to others. James, at 24, becomes a vital cog in the campaign machine. He crisscrosses the country on whistle-stop trains, the air thick with coal smoke and desperation. At each stop, he works the crowd with a practiced ease, sharing cigarettes with reporters and spinning tales of Franklin's unyielding spirit. "My father's stronger than this depression," he says, his voice steady, even as he positions himself to block views of Franklin's leg braces, a secret he's guarded since his teens. Behind the scenes, James is a strategist, advising on speeches and smoothing tensions among campaign staff. His youth and charm disarm skeptics, but the role takes a toll. The ulcers flare, and Betsy, often left alone as James travels, begins to feel the weight of being a Roosevelt wife, always in the spotlight, rarely in control. The election on November 8, 1932, delivered a Democratic landslide, sweeping Franklin into the White House. On Inauguration Day, March 4, 1933, James stands proudly beside his father, now the 32nd president, as a nation battered by bank failures and unemployment pins its hopes on the New Deal. At 25, James becomes the White House's unofficial ambassador, a role that blends charm with cunning. Officially an insurance trainee at Roosevelt and Sargent, a Boston firm, he's far more: a gatekeeper who controls access to the president, a confidant who deciphers Franklin's cryptic nods, and a liaison who bridges the White House and the world beyond. His days are a blur of meetings, phone calls, and late-night strategy sessions, often with Betsy waiting at home. Their two daughters, Sarah and Kate, born in 1932 and 1934, growing up in a household shaped by political fervor. James adores his girls, delighting in their giggles during rare moments of play, but his duties leave little time for fatherhood, a regret that begins to haunt him. In 1937, at 30, James accepted the formal title of White House Secretary, a position that thrusts him deeper into the political maelstrom. The role, while prestigious, is a lightning rod for criticism. Political opponents and muckraking journalists accuse him of exploiting his position to boost his insurance business, alleging he lobbies federal agencies for favors. The New Yorker published a scathing expose in 1937, painting James as a profiteer trading on his father's name. The headlines sting, but Eleanor's reaction, her silent, piercing disapproval, cuts deeper. Raised to value integrity above all, she sees James's actions as a betrayal of the Roosevelt ethos. Betsy, too, feels the strain, her patience tested by the constant scrutiny and James's long hours. Their marriage, once a partnership of equals, begins to fray, with Betsy retreating into her role as mother and hostess, while James buries himself in work. The ulcers burn hotter, And James, caught between loyalty to his father and his own ambitions, feels the walls closing in. By June 1938, the pressure became unbearable. James resigns as White House secretary, publicly stating it's to protect his father's administration from further controversy. In a private journal entry, he reveals a deeper truth. I walked away before the Roosevelt name turned from a key to a lock. The decision leaves him unmoored, a man in his early 30s searching for purpose beyond the political arena that defined his youth. Betsy, hoping for a quieter life, supports the move, but their relationship remains strained, the distance between them growing as James grapples with his identity. The birth of their daughters had briefly rekindled their closeness, but the relentless demands of Washington and James's rumored flirtations with other women eroded Betsy's trust. By 1940, their marriage collapses and they divorce, with Betsy gaining custody of Sarah and Kate and a substantial settlement. The tabloids feast on the scandal. Roosevelt's son's marriage fails, and James, heartbroken but resolute, moves west, seeking a fresh start. Hollywood, with its promise of glamour and reinvention, calls like a siren. In 1940, James settled into a sun-drenched bungalow in Beverly Hills, where the air was thick with the scent of orange blossoms and ambition. At 33, he dives into the film industry, pitching screenplays to producers and dining at the Brown Derby, where stars like Clark Gable and studio moguls hold court. The transition is exhilarating but humbling. In Washington, his name opened doors. In Hollywood, it earns polite nods but little deference. Studio heads, unimpressed by presidential lineage, demand results, and James learns to navigate a world where creativity and deal-making trump pedigree. He options novels, collaborates with writers, and even toys with producing a war epic, his imagination fired by the era's patriotic fervor. Socially, he thrives, hosting parties where jazz records spin and guests marvel at his tales of White House intrigue. Yet the ulcers persist, a reminder that even in this new world he's chasing validation, haunted by the fear that he's still just FDR's son. For a time, Hollywood feels like home. James leases a sleek convertible, cruising Sunset Boulevard with the wind in his hair, and forms friendships with aspiring directors and actresses who see him as more than a Roosevelt. He begins dating Rommel Schneider, a luminous stage actress whose infectious laugh and artistic spirit captivate him. Their romance, sparked at a screenwriter's party, offers a glimpse of freedom from his past, and by 1941, they marry in a quiet ceremony, a stark contrast to the spectacle of his wedding to Betsy. Rommel, with her bohemian flair, encourages James to embrace his creative side, and they dream of building a life together in California. But the shadow of the Roosevelt name and James's restless drive looms large, and their marriage, like his first, will soon face tests neither can foresee. The idyll shattered on December 7, 1941, when news of Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor crackled across radio waves, plunging America into war. The nation's shock mirrors James's own. At 34, he feels a surge of purpose, a chance to prove his mettle beyond the silver screen or his father's legacy. Hollywood's glitter fades, duty calls. Despite his ulcers, which doctors warn could worsen under stress, James enlists in the United States Marine Corps Reserve, trading tailored suits for dog tags. The decision is both personal and profound. He's driven not just by patriotism, but by a need to define himself, to show the world and perhaps himself that he's more than a famous name. As he boards a train for training, Rommel waves goodbye, her smile masking worry. James, steeling himself for the unknown, carries the weight of his past and the hope of a future forged by his own hands. August 1942, Macon Island. Lieutenant Colonel James leads Carlson's raiders in a bold night assault. Waves pound black sand, bullets streak the sky. Shrapnel tears his knee, blood pooling, but he drags a wounded soldier to safety, barking orders through agony. The raid's tactical gain is modest, but its symbolism is seismic. The president's son in combat, not a desk jockey. Newspapers that once scorned him now crown him a hero. The silver star gleams, the shrapnel stays, a reminder that bravery and blemish coexist. The war ends, but peace ignites new battles. In 1950, James accepted $150,000 to lobby for loans for Rafael Trujillo, the Dominican dictator. Senate probes follow, and the scandal sticks. Despite his insistence, he sought agricultural aid, not despot's profit. His personal life phrase: Betsy, warned by the relentless spotlight and whispers of James's infidelity, divorces him in 1940, securing $500,000 and custody of their two daughters, Sarah and Kate. The split is a public wound, tabloids feasting on the Roosevelt son's broken vows. James, stung but restless, marries Romel Schneider in 1941, a radiant Los Angeles actress whose charm lights up stages. Their romance blooms amid Hollywood's glow, but the strain of war and James's frequent absences, coupled with gossip about his wandering eye, erodes their bond. By 1945, they part, leaving James with a son, Michael, and a heart bruised by failure. In 1946, he weds Gladys Irene Owens, a vivacious stewardess who brings warmth and two more children, James Jr. and Anne, into his life. But the ghosts of his past, scandals, expectations, and the Roosevelt name haunt this marriage too, and it crumbles by 1950. Headlines blare, Roosevelt's third marriage collapses. Each divorce chips away at his spirit, yet James, ever the fighter, presses on. His family life, though turbulent, shapes him profoundly. With Betsy, he shared a glamorous partnership, their early years filled with laughter on yacht decks and quiet moments raising their daughters. But the White House's glare and James's ambition strained their love, leaving Betsy to forge a new life while James grappled with guilt over his absent fatherhood. Romel, with her artistic soul, offered a brief escape from politics, but their son Michael grew up largely without James's presence, a regret that lingered. Gladys brought joy and stability, and their children, James Jr. and Anne, were rays of light. But the marriage buckled under James's restless drive and public scrutiny. Through each union, James sought connection, yet the Roosevelt legacy, its demands, its visibility, often left him torn between family and duty. Politics, an inescapable pull, calls him back. In 1954, tanned by California sun and scarred by battle, James runs for Congress in Los Angeles' 26th district. He campaigns from a beat-up station wagon, gripping hands at factories, promising veteran support and leaning on his war record rather than his surname. Voters embrace his blend of charisma and grit. He wins, striding into Washington, where Franklin's portrait looms large. Over a decade in the House, James proves a tireless advocate, co-sponsoring the 1965 Medicare bill, a cornerstone that fulfills FDR's vision of Social Security. Standing near President Johnson as the bill is signed, James feels his father's pride echo across time, a rare moment of alignment with the Roosevelt legacy. Yet, his personal life remains a storm. In 1976, he published My Parents, A Differing View, portraying Eleanor as aloof and demanding. The New York Times calls it bold. Family allies brand it disloyalty. Though he reconciled with Eleanor before her 1962 death, the book stirs old tensions among siblings. When Brother Elliot died in 1990, James's eulogy speaks of struggles and redemption his voice quaking, his steps faltering. Parkinson's is tightening its grip. In 1969, James finds lasting love with Mary Winskill, a compassionate nurse whose warmth soothes his battle-worn soul. They welcome a son, Delano, and James, now softer, pours devotion into fatherhood, savoring bedtime stories and beachside walks. Settling in Newport Beach, far from Hyde Park's heavy air, they build a life of barbecues and community, where neighbors sometimes overlook his lineage. Mary becomes his rock, understanding the nights he wakes, haunted by memories of gunfire or his parents' towering expectations. This marriage, unlike the others, endures, a testament to James's growth and Mary's steadfast love. Delano, raised with James's presence, binds the family in a way earlier children could not, healing old wounds from his distant fatherhood. The 1980s arrive with prosperity and pop culture, but James's body betrays him. Surgeries for ulcers leave scars like winding trails across his abdomen. The shrapnel in his knee throbs in foggy weather. Parkinson claims his handwriting, then his balance, then the commanding wave that once swayed crowds. He clings to his red convertible, cruising the Pacific Coast Highway until tremors make it impossible. Turning to dictation, he records tales of Medicare's genesis, Marine courage, and the Roosevelt name's double edge. Historians will pore over these tapes, but one raw confession shines. Half my life was proving a Roosevelt could be mortal, the other half, that a mortal could be a Roosevelt. Memories of loss haunt him. On April 12, 1945, James raced to Warm Springs, Georgia, too late. Franklin was gone, felled by a brain hemorrhage. He offered reporters hollow words, then retched behind a tree. On November 7, 1962, Eleanor succumbed to tuberculosis and anemia. At her funeral, James clutched Brother John's hand, two men adrift, without their parents' guiding stars. These blows taught him that even titans kneel to time. By 1991, time demands its due. A stroke mutes his quick wit. Parkinson's traps his body. As dusk paints the hospital room, James senses his life's real slowing. Beyond the window, waves echo the roar of Medicare's victory. Palm trees murmur Mary's gentle laugh. Oxygen hums like boots on coral sand. In the fading light, he recalls Franklin's sly grin in a crowded rail car, Eleanor's soothing touch during fevered nights, the stunned gratitude of a soldier he saved amid gunfire. He passes before dawn, his ashes later strewn across the Hudson River, where valor and vice mingle in its ceaseless flow. His estate gifts $2 million to Harvard and the FDR Library, a final bow to knowledge and heritage. The New York Times praises his heroism, lauds his legislative feats, and nods to the controversies. But his real legacy lives in quieter corners, in the memories of aides who cherished his sly grin, in the gratitude of elders eased by Medicare, in the laughter of old Hollywood friends recalling the night he swapped a film pitch for bourbon and truths about living as a Roosevelt. Somewhere, if myths resonate, Franklin's booming laugh ripples through Hyde Park, and Eleanor's piercing eyes track her son, hobbling toward eternity, his once lightening shoes frayed but still aglow. James Roosevelt was no mere heir. He was a battlefield hero, a healthcare pioneer, a man who stumbled yet stood tall. His marriages, Betsy's elegance, Ramel's spark, Gladys's warmth, Mary's constancy, shaped him as much as his public deeds, each teaching him about love, loss, and redemption. His life was a symphony of soaring highs and jagged lows, never predictable, always unforgettable. When you glimpse his faded image beside movie stars or hear his voice in grainy Medicare debates, know you're seeing just a sliver of a radiant story. He was a soldier and schemer, devoted son and defiant dreamer, broken heart and relentless optimist. He was a Roosevelt, tasked with being all things and bold or brash enough to try.